biggest challenge is the lack of good listening skills. To listen to understand instead of to listen to respond.
What's the difference?
What's the difference?
Yes, listen to understand and listen to respond. You need to understand to respond, right?
So what you're doing right now is you're listening to me to understand, right? You know, the thing with communication is it's like a skill that you never stop learning.
My brain cannot ignore notifications.
I think maybe the most important thing is to have your own boundaries clear. Online communication is a skill and a very important skill that we have to learn and develop. But when it comes even to video calling, like we're only seeing this from each other. So you cannot sense the energy, you cannot sense how someone is doing. So that's already a big thing.
If in your team you have some people in the meeting that have a camera off and some have camera on, as a leader, what should you do? Every time I go to a training, the first thing I think is, oh, probably I don't need the camera on because this is going to be one direction only, right?
No, João. What kind of trainings have you had?
But I'm going to stand my ground here. No, when I'm speaking, I'm not looking at people. What am I doing wrong here?
Yeah, you're really pushing all my buttons right now. With a lot of online communication, digital transformation is that we get presented with something new. Everyone just needs to do it, like go and figure it out. And that's where a lot of resistance is coming from.
What would be the best strategy to captivate audiences on stage or online? How should I prepare myself to know how to storytell?
So what I do, I keep a story database. Yeah, I think it's important when you're on stage not to strive to be like the perfect speaker, but the most authentic speaker.
Hello, Eileen. How are you feeling today?
I'm doing great, thank you. How are you?
I'm also good and very excited for our conversation. To set the tone for this introduction. So when I met you in person and you describe what you do, after that I look at your social media profiles, which the link is on the video description. And in general, you do a very interesting work around communication and how to unlock communication within companies with systems and training people to be more effective in communication. So a very broad experience you have, but the key term there is communication. So in order to introduce you today, I choose one of the sentences that you have on your profile, and I'm quoting you now: someone who helps professionals to connect, communicate, and collaborate for impact and change. Wow.
Yes, sir.
What are then the biggest communication challenges that teams face today, and how do you help solving them?
The biggest communication challenge. I think if we look at communication, it's not only teams, we as people struggle with it in general. And I think the biggest challenge is the lack of good listening skills.
Okay.
So I believe that communication starts with being a good listener, and that a lot of communication issues or problems or struggles could be solved if we would learn to communicate to understand, or to listen to understand instead of to listen to respond.
What's the difference, Eileen?
What's the difference?
Yes, listen to understand and listen to respond. You need to understand to respond, right?
So what you're doing right now is you're listening to me to understand, right? So I'm saying something and you're like, wait a minute, I don't get what she says. I'm going to ask her a follow-up question to dive in what she means. Like, I want to know exactly what she means by that. But in a lot of conversations that we have with people, I think we tend to just respond like, oh yeah, that my experience was this and this and this. Or yeah, I already know that, but so and so and so. What I'm trying to say is that if we have a conversation and we listen to someone, it's better to just think, okay, what exactly is this person trying to say? Because we have such an urge to respond, but you can also respond with a follow-up question or with okay, I'm not understanding exactly what you're saying. What do you mean? Could you elaborate?
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to teams, like there's so many different dynamics, there's so many different opinions. maybe struggles going on. I think if you would want to lead a team and be a good leader, then you need to be able to listen to your team members.
Okay. So I just realized that now that I'm speaking with a specialist in communication, I'm also being evaluated today.
No.
My conversation and communication skills.
Not at all. The thing with communication is it's like a skill that you never stop learning. Like you cannot become an expert in communication, of course, to a certain degree, but it's just an endless learning game. So and for me, I sometimes think, maybe I could have done that better. Or maybe I should have, approached that in a different way. So no.
If you assume that the problem is people just listen to respond and not to understand, how do you personally help people, companies to communicate better?
Yeah. So I work on different projects, right? And one of the most important things that we always start with is like, know your audience. So who are you talking to? Who exactly are those people that you either want, maybe you have a change that you need to implement within the team, or you want to change the dynamic, or you have certain goals that you want to accomplish. So who are these people? What are their pains? What are their struggles? What lights them up? Where is resistance? So we always focus first on who are the people that we are communicating to get them to know better. And also, what language do they speak? And I'm not obviously talking about French or Spanish or whatever, but like, what kind of reference do they have and how do they look at the world and how can you relate to that so that you know how you can communicate with them?
So nowadays, you need to consider two types of communication that you may need on your team, right? So you have in-person synchronous communication, direct communication. I don't know exactly which is the proper term. But then also you may have only asynchronous communication, remote communication, etc. Or you may have both because you have people near you and then you have the other team in the other side of the world. So you need to be a professional in both types of communication. When does one of these communications is better than the other? Is like the perfect moment or place to use one and the perfect moment to use the other one if you are not forced to due to distances?
I think a healthy balance is very important. So, for example, I'm working on a really big project where a government institution wants their employees to use a certain communication tool. These are like nearly 100,000 employees. Obviously, we cannot do that all in person. That is just not possible. But what we can do is create webinars. So when we talk about asynchronous or synchronous, we have chosen to do webinars, meaning these are live. So they're, with me, for example. So people will have a live interaction with us. There's a VNA, a chat, like they have a moment to interact, opposed to, for example, video clips that they can work on their own time. So we choose to do, in that example, a webinar, right? So they can sign up, there are certain dates, because for one, that is more engaging and it creates more community. Especially when it comes to change, you really need to give people the sense that they're part of something. But on the other side, not everyone can, make space in their schedule to, for example, watch these webinars. So we've also created a lot of asynchronous materials. So these are information clips, a website where they can find all the info, what they can find in their own time. So I think a healthy combination is very important. Also because people just have different times, different needs, different, preferences, etc.
Okay. So a webinar, just to be clear for everyone, a webinar is a call, right?
Yeah. So a webinar is an online seminar. So it's usually a 1 hour meeting, but it's prepared. So I have like a whole PowerPoint that is taught out to the exact slide, word, in order for people to either give information, like teach them something new, etc. And it's a live situation. So people can just log in, they can watch, they can engage with the polls, with the questions, they can ask questions, etc. But it's a live online situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So apart from the Q&A that may exist during or in the end of the webinar, why would that be beneficial if you create just like a video training and people just watch the training?
Well, actually, the V&A is a very important part of it, especially when it comes to digital change. Like, a lot of people have a lot of insecurities, a lot of fears of, oh no, this is another thing that we have to do, for example, another tool, maybe even resistance, what they have. So we, for example, have a team with people that are answering the Q&A live. So behind the scenes, we've got like 4 or 5 people that are answering the questions.
Written Q&A.
Yeah, okay. Written Q&A. But then also during a webinar like that, we, for example, have an MC is what we call this person. So I'm giving the webinar, and the other people, I give that person the moment and say like, hey, are there any questions that are relevant for everyone? And then she'll say them out loud, for example. But there are more interaction moments. So we ask polls, we have different quizzes that give them the opportunity and the feeling that they're really a part of it. And it's also how you bring the webinar, right? If you come with a certain energy and you know that there are other people that are watching, and you know that I, for example, am responding to a certain question while you're sitting behind your computer, it creates a bigger engagement than you just watching a video on playback.
We'll talk a little bit about engagement and interacting with the audiences.
Okay.
I would still like to deep dive a little bit more on the challenges that people have in communication. So I'll bring you some examples, which I'm thinking that I feel the responsibility today, Eileen, to represent all the people out there that have challenges with communication and be the vehicle to bring those challenges to you to find some solutions.
Okay.
So don't feel the pressure. Imagine that I work completely remotely.
Right.
And with people from all over the world. So some people overlap with me, the same time zones, and we have the chance to interact through Slack mainly, right? And other people, I never see them because they are on the other side of the world. It's mainly asynchronous communication with people, right? And through digital means.
Mm-hmm.
What recommendations would you give me as a manager or working with peers if I need to connect with people synchronously by chat to make sure that communication is efficient?
By chat, or is there also video calling?
By chat. Mainly, imagine every day is chatting here, slacking this, slacking that. So normally in person, when you speak to someone, you see they are responding, they are active listening or not. They move their head like, I understand, etc. When you're chatting, you don't know if the message arrived there the way the sender imagines it. So as a specialist, what would you recommend for me which way should I communicate to make sure that message is clear?
Good questions, because we use a lot of video calling, which I think is a big part of why we feel connected. But when it comes to chat, which is what we obviously also use, what you could do is create specific chat rooms for example, non-related topics. So I know that there are companies that like to have one outlet where they can just chit chat, literally.
Like random channel.
Yeah, because when you're in an office talking with another person, you're also sometimes talking in random about things, right?
Right.
Like maybe you have a shared hobby or shared interests. Creating these kinds of chats and give people the freedom to just communicate in there whenever they feel like could bring back that sense of normality and sense of ease in the communication that is not only work focused, because I do think it's important to have those moments of non-work conversation, because that's how you build up
the virtual chit chat.
Yeah.
Virtual water cooler conversations.
Yeah, I think that would be the I think that would be a good one. And then maybe you could even prompt. So even like, let's say you're a team leader and you're interested about your team, you can say, hey, we have like weekly prompts, and you as a leader ask your team some interesting questions that are maybe not necessarily work related, or they are work related, but a little bit different, to get people engaged in a different way than just their daily tasks.
Mm-hmm.
And also, if at some point you have a conversation via chat and you're like, I feel like this person didn't understood me well, or this person is mad at me, which I think we have a lot of assumptions and it's easy to assume those things via chat. Ask for clarification. Like, hey, what did you mean by that? Or, hey, could you explain this a little bit further? To prevent assuming things that maybe aren't there, and creating communication issues that maybe were not necessary.
Asking a person to jump into a call, is that being disrespectful in any way, or?
It really depends on the dynamic of the team. Like, I work for a company called Learning to Connected. We're a small team, and we work together really well. So I can just call them randomly.
Okay, not intrusive.
No, no. And if I cannot, pick up the phone, I'll be like, no, I can't do it now. But that's because we have a very small team and our dynamic is very clear. Like, it's not an issue. However, if you, and maybe it's because we are all, learning developers, trainers, focus on communication, that maybe makes it also a little bit easier.
You're biased to, okay, we need to communicate. We need to have calls.
That helps, yeah. But I think with other companies, and I think especially with, software tech companies, it's not as appreciated. So give them ask them when they have time, and also clearly state what you're calling them for. Like, hey, I just wanted to get to know you and catch up, prepare people. Usually people who are prepared appreciate that a little bit more than just ambush them.
The way I see the reality nowadays, especially working remotely, is that everyone is multitasking. You are doing several things at the same time.
Yeah.
Which some of the things are notifications popping up. This person saying that, this person saying that. Maybe you're constantly being bombarded with things. So you cannot process everything at the same time. So while you may be messaging me with something that is important, on my side, I may be doing something else. I just see on the corner of the screen the notification. I may read it like in 2 microseconds. Some things get lost in communication, right? So I'm not sure if there is a trick that everyone could, besides if it's really important, hey, let's jump into a call. If there is something that we could do as a sender or as a receiver to make sure that nothing fails on today's world.
You saying that, it actually, I think maybe the most important thing is to have your own boundaries clear, because now that I think about it, when I'm working and I'm focused on something, like we, for example, use a lot of WebEx, I just put it in my status. So I sit and put it in my status, like, I'm not available. I'm working on whatever it is. And I won't get any notifications. And people know that I won't get any notifications at all, because I'm just working. So that's the boundary that I set for myself.
Your focus time.
Yeah, exactly. If I really need to focus on something, then I want to focus, and I set that boundary for the other person. And make it clear, like, hey, now is not the moment to contact me. For one, I won't see it, and 2, I won't answer. And I think if you have that very clearly and strongly in place, the moments that it's open, you can maybe welcome it a little bit more.
Something that I do on my side, and please tell me if this is correct, if you think this is like makes sense or not, or if it works or not, is my brain cannot ignore notifications. So even if I'm multitasking, if there is a pop-up, my brain and my eyes, they will read it.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is, once I read, I get caught by the message, meaning that I may be doing something else, but then I read the message and I'm travel to another place because of the message, right?
Yeah.
Then what I do is I check the new topic and I just if it's something that I need to do it later, I just mark it as unread, meaning that I can, and when I go back to the list of the message, see that that item is still needs to be addressed as unread. Although I've read it, I mark it as unread. Okay. But sometimes when I change the topic like that, and I follow the new topic and the new line of thought, sometimes I have difficulties remembering, hey, what I was doing before.
Yeah.
Right. It happens. I'm not sure if it's like my mental.
No, for sure. We have the same mental.
Yeah, I just quit, and then when I want to switch back, hey, what was I doing before? I don't remember. I need to go back to my message, see which one was, etc. So that's how I manage it. But I don't think this is scalable. If you get like, it could work if you get like one message every 5 minutes or every 10. But if you like receiving tons of messages, this is not scalable. And maybe if you get more and more responsibilities and you are more and more accountable in a company, you just have everyone bombarding you with messages. So I'm not sure how CEOs and big leaders of teams, etc., survive in the middle of so many messages. It just creates stress, at least for me.
Yeah. I mean, I can completely imagine that. I don't know how, I know a lot of people that get bombarded, but then, like I said, they also put very clear boundaries. So,
right, to survive.
Yeah, sometimes they have like an automatic message with, hey, I'm working on, I will respond between then and then, or I can't respond between whatever time frame. For me, the same. I cannot work with notification because I get instantly distracted. So I really need to mute all the notification.
Yeah.
In our system, it's super easy. We just press the button and it's muted.
Yeah.
But I have to do that. Mm-hmm. And I think if you're a leader or a CEO, I think you should probably do the same thing, but then also communicate that to your team so that they know that that is what you're doing, and not that they're wondering like, hey, but he hasn't responded to me in a while. Why is that? Is he mad at me, or whatever goes on in our minds? Like, communicate to your team, like, hey guys, I'm very busy. I get this amount of messages per day. Please message me only if it's regarding this. Set some rules for yourself that are manageable.
What trends are you seeing in remote communication that excite you, or on the contrary, worry you?
Well, what I'm actually really excited about is that I am seeing now that a lot of companies are really realizing that online communication is a skill, and a very important skill that we have to learn and develop. So it's not like, we're all going to work remotely. Oh, we're going to work online. We're going to do a training online or a webinar online. And we just transform whatever we have in person to online, take it as it is. But they're like, oh, no, wait a minute. This works a little bit different. And we need to all learn how. And our employees probably also need a little bit help with that. So I'm very much appreciating that it's now seen as a skill and as something that we need to develop, and not as just a given that just works.
Before you tell what worries you, I want to ask you then, can you give an example? What would be a bad online communication skill?
Anything that is a bad offline communication skill is also a bad online communication skill. So, not letting other people speak, not making sure that if you have a meeting that everyone feels seen, feels heard, that kind of stuff.
What's unique then on online communication that does not exist in person?
Yeah, we miss a lot of nonverbal communication. That's for one. So especially if you're only communicating through chat, right? You have not much to go off by except for like your own perceptions of how you receive a message and what you maybe know about that person and their personality. But when it comes even to video calling, like, we're only seeing this from each other. So you cannot sense the energy. You cannot sense how someone is doing. So that's already a big thing. Like, our basic senses are being, cut off a little bit.
Does that mean that you need to be sharper in evaluating the energy, the nonverbal communication, or you just need to have different cues?
No, I think you need to be sharper, and you need to consciously build in check-in points.
Okay.
So whereas in real life, you would probably sense it, how someone is, feeling about a certain topic. When it's online communication, you maybe need to fact check it and be like, I don't know, start a poll or just, double check. Hey, how do you guys feel about this? Can you please, give your opinion? And some people feel very uncomfortable talking in an online space. So we use a lot of polls, online tools like Slido, Miro, that kind of stuff to lower the hurdle and make it a little bit more, easier to express yourself. But we always build them in very consciously. So we know like, okay, having a meeting, or if we're having a training, for example, I know this topic is going to cause a little bit of resistance. So I need to make sure that they can express themselves after me, explaining this certain topic. So I built in a certain poll where they have the opportunity to express themselves, but not in a way that I say, okay, you, João, say everything to the camera, because then people are like, oh, hell no, I don't want to do that. So it's very consciously building, connection points.
What is your feeling when someone has the camera turned off?
Yeah, interesting. As a trainer, when I'm giving trainings, I, as a general rule, have cameras on, and I usually prepare people beforehand as well. So I don't ambush them. Like, they know they're having a training in 2 weeks. They will receive an email saying like, hey, I'm giving a training. It's going to be very interactive. I would like to interact with you and see you guys. So camera on would be appreciated. But obviously, you're not going to force someone. So if they don't want to put their camera on, they usually will tell you why or whatever reason if you have prepared them. So I'm not going to force them, but usually that already helps. Like, the cameras for me are often on.
So if in your team you have some people in a meeting that have a camera off and some have camera on, as a leader, what should you do? Should you ask people to turn camera on? Should you ask why the camera is not on? Or you should just forget about that and move on?
No, I would just say like, hey, I would really appreciate it if you have the camera, if you guys could turn the camera on. If it's not possible, that's okay. And then just continue with your session. And then at the end, I would say like, hey guys, for me, it would be really beneficial if I could see you guys. So once again, could we maybe find a way that we can all see each other for the next time? I wouldn't ambush them in that exact moment.
By ambush, you say what you mean is calling out those people.
Yeah, calling out and they're not expecting it, or, that's just usually not appreciated, and it will cause a lot of resistance, even more resistance probably. But it also depends, like I said, it depends on the field that you work in, the type of information, the type of meeting. But for me as a trainer, I'm giving a trainer to you. I'm putting time, effort, and energy into it. I want to teach you something. And especially when it comes to communication, having your camera on is a requirement. Yes.
That's exactly the example that I would think that maybe you don't need a camera on, because as you mentioned, you are a trainer. So it's like you're giving the training and other people are just listening. So every time I go to a training, the first thing I think is, oh, probably I don't need a camera on because this is going to be one direction only, right?
No, João. What kind of trainings have you had?
So someone is just on exposing mode, presenting, and I'm just hearing and seeing. So I don't need to interact. I'm just watching. So why would I need a camera on?
Then so I'm also like a learning developer. So I create trainings, I train trainers. And this is like the blueprint of how not to create a training. So if you have experienced trainings where you feel like it's a one-way communication, that's like a big red flag for me. It's a big no. Because for me, the definition of training, it's a two-way thing. And if it's a one-way thing, something has gone terribly wrong, in my opinion, as a trainer and learning developer. No, absolutely not.
Okay. Red flag here for me.
No. Like, that's the whole point. It's so important to have two-way communication. You need to engage you need to engage people. Like I need the participants in order to do the training. I cannot even do them without their participation.
Okay. Maybe it's just the trainings that I've been part of that are not as good as yours, maybe. But I'm going to stand my ground here, Eileen. I'm going to stand my ground and I'm going to defend my point of view, which is every time I'm also like presenting something on camera to an audience, to be honest, I'm looking at the slides on my side. So my screen has the slides and I'm like taking people through the slides. And I'm not actually looking at the faces of people in Zoom or Google, etc. I'm focused on the materials that I'm delivering. So as a trainer, and now you're going to kill me. As a trainer, it's irrelevant if people are showing their faces or not, because I'm focused on the content that I'm delivering. Maybe it's just the platform that I'm using that does not allow me to have like the faces and the content at the same time, or small screen, etc. But that's a reality that I know. When I'm speaking, I'm not looking at people. What am I doing wrong here?
Yeah, you're really pushing all my buttons right now.
Jesus, you're going to drop the call and leave.
No, absolutely not. Like, it's a process for everyone, right? And I know that there's a lot of people that do that. For me, one of the most important things that I do is I always work with two screens. Okay. So on one, I have the slides and the presentations, and I do look at them for sure. Like it has my notes, it has my next slides, etc. But the other slide has all the faces on it. And whenever I say something, whenever I ask a question, whenever I say something that I know can cause a certain reaction, my face goes instantly to my participants. What do I see? Do I see a change in their demeanor? Do they react in a certain way? Mm-hmm. And when they do, I will mention that. So I will say like, oh, I notice that everyone is nodding, or I see a shocked face. What do we mean by that? Mm-hmm. So yeah, for me, that is very important. And that's why for me, having a camera on is super important, because I constantly refer back to my participants.
Mm-hmm. So yeah. If you are like a trainer, you need to have a setup that allows you to see the audience and see the content. Like if you work in a trading room, you have all those screens with
sometimes it really feels
like that. Okay. Then let me also think a little bit. So if you do like a presentation for 20, 30 people, you can see all the faces. But then if you scale up to more than that, probably you need to scroll to the side to see the other face. Is there a way that you have multiple screens with all those faces, or you really scroll to everyone?
Sometimes I do scroll, yeah. Like, for example, sometimes I ask spontaneous questions out of the questions that are already integrated in my presentation. And then I'll say, like, hey, can you guys nod or put up your digital hand, whatever. And I'll just say, like, let me just scroll so I can see all your faces. But saying that also gives them the idea of like, oh, wait a minute, she's actually doing this for us,
I should not multitask then.
Well, actually, just to make a difference, because I'm now talking about a training. So this is a group up to 25 people. That is like an interactive exchange with all the cameras on. And when I'm talking about a webinar, for example, I give webinars to 600, 700, 800 people at a time, then I don't see their faces. So there is a difference. I don't see their faces, but I will communicate with them as if I see them.
So it's more one direction that the webinar.
Yeah, but then we have a lot of polls and questions and interaction moments integrated. So then I'll say like, oh, Lisa said this and this and this. That's actually a really good idea. Thank you, Lisa. Or I usually ask activating questions that are related to the content, and then ask their opinions. And then if they say their opinion, I said, oh, Tom mentioned this. That's actually, I understand why Tom can be worried about this, but let me exactly explain, the next steps that make sure that he's not worried about that anymore. So I'll do it in a different way. I usually have one other person with their camera on, and I just talk to them as if they are the rest of the people.
Okay. it helps you to have someone to speak.
Yeah, if I'm completely by myself, no, it doesn't have the same energy. So if I have one other person with me, who's often the person who does the Q&A live, I just present the webinar to that person as if they are all the other people. Yeah.
In order to go back and close the previous topic, so you mentioned that online communication skill was something that was exciting you. The people are realizing that's a skill that needs to be developed.
Yeah.
What about the contrary? So what's worrying you in terms of trends at the moment?
Like online communication trends?
Yes, or remote communication.
Yeah, this question is interesting because it makes me realize how fortunate I am with how, my online work is set up, because it's working well. But I think there's a lot of companies that are actually going back to the office. And that is worrying me, because I think what is happening is like productivity or lack of productivity gets blamed now on remote work, which can be the truth, maybe not, maybe partially. But the issue is that a lot of people are just not taught how to do so. So, you can give a person a bike and then let them figure it out. Or you can actually give them the bike and help them how to ride it. And then we all, would benefit from it a little bit better. And I think what's happening with a lot of online communication, digital transformation, is that we get presented with something new. Everyone just needs to do it, like go and figure it out. And that's where a lot of resistance is coming from.
You gave a little bit the idea that you either communicate to smaller teams or larger audiences. And you also help people that are doing exactly the same thing as leaders or people managers. What would be then, in your opinion, the best strategy to cultivate or captivate audiences on stage or online?
Okay, so how to captivate your audience, whether it's online, offline, on a stage. For one, like I said in the beginning, get to know your audience. So what I often do is, if I know that I have a talk at a certain event, I'll figure out, who are these people coming to this event? What's their profile? What do they do? What do they want to know? What do they struggle with? What is something that I want to learn? And I do that with everything, with every training, presentation, whatever it is that I create. I investigate those people. So that can either be through the event organizer that obviously knows who's coming, but I also do interviews. So I'll ask people that fit the profile, and I'll ask them some questions in depth, and then I create personas of those people. Like, okay, the persona of the person that is coming to this talk or this training is this. This person has a background in this. Their base level of knowledge about this topic is this. Is also very important. Like, or are there different levels of knowledge to start with, for example? These are their struggles. This is resistance, and this is what actually makes them light up and makes them happy. So that is knowing your audience. Then, secondly, I would say the why. So why are you communicating this to this specific persona that you're serving? What is the benefit for them? Why are they going to benefit from learning about this, or going within the change of, for example, a big digital change? What's in it for them? And how is this going to help them further in their work, in their life, etc.? And make sure that you communicate that why. So they need to know why they should be on board for themselves. And then I'd say third would be use storytelling. Tell your story. So I use stories a lot to communicate different concepts, because I think we can use stories to relate to these people. And then because they can relate to that stories, we can create change, or we can help them teach stuff. And, there's a whole plethora of things that you can do with storytelling. And once you have all these things, so you know your audience, you have your why, you have stories that you can connect to your audience as a bridge. You have the audience, you have your message, and the story is a bridge to your goal. And then it's just your presence, your energy, the way you show up and communicate with them. So how do you show up? Are you just sitting like a bag of potatoes? Are you sitting straight? Are you looking in the camera every so often? Are you asking them questions? Are you looking them into the eyes? Like, what can you do to make them feel seen and heard and understood?
I was listening to you and I was mentally doing the analogy with like sales world, which is know your client, right? Know how to add value to your product, which is expectations they should have from the presentation, delivering it, which is how you communicate the storytelling. Okay? And then your appearance, especially in person sales, your appearance is important, right? The way you dress, the way you communicate to influence the client. So it's a very client approach that you use, right? The people that are listening are the clients for your message, your clients.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is actually, if you think about it, it's a sales process, right? Like you need to sell them on something, and you're selling it to the customer basically. But that whatever you are selling can be an idea, can be inspiration, can be something new that they're learning, can be change, whatever it is. But I think it has similar principles. Yeah.
You use the term storytelling. I guess that's a deeper concept than just storytelling being said here easily. What is exactly storytelling for you, Eileen?
Storytelling is telling a story, right? But
how should I prepare myself to know how to storytell properly?
So what I do is I keep a story database. Meaning, story database. So we, during our days as people, we constantly tell stories, right? Something happened at the dinner table, whatever it is, maybe things that happened when you were younger. And every story that I tell, I write down in a database. So I write down when it happened, what exactly was the story, maybe there was a certain lesson, etc. And then when I have something that I want to teach or I want to convey, I'll go back and think of my personal stories and think, what story do I have personally that can be the vehicle of my message? So how can I use a story of myself that other people can relate to that makes my message clear? And that is how I approach nearly everything. Same thing with change communication. So for example, this company, they want their employees to use a certain communication tool. What are their stories? Is there a certain frustration that they have that I can capture into a storyline? So I can create a persona, I create a storyline, I create a case kind of situation that they can relate themselves to. So they see themselves in that story and then use that story to get your point across.
So the story is like incorporating whatever you're trying to tell or whatever is the purpose of the message into a real example that would help people to understand what you're trying to say or what you're trying to teach. Does it need to be like a real example, or could you like take a story just to make it more clear?
It depends on the topic. Like, for example, I have a training in how to captivate your audience while speaking on stage. And I tell the story about how when I was a young kid and came to Portugal, I was born in the Netherlands. And then I came to Portugal to visit my family. And every time I came here and I tried to speak Portuguese, my family, the neighbors, everyone would laugh at me. And when I would make a mistake in saying something, they would all laugh. They would be like, did you hear Eileen? She said it wrong. Oh my goodness.
You develop a trauma.
Yes, I did. Because one day, this neighbor of my grandma, she came to me. I was 13 or 14 years old, and she said, "You haven't learned the language of your mom yet? What a shame you are." And that sentence caused me to not speak Portuguese for the next 15 years. I just stopped speaking Portuguese. I was so humiliated and embarrassed that I thought, no, I'm never doing this again. Until like 3 years ago, I moved to Portugal and I thought, no, wait a minute, this is my heritage. This is a part of me. Like, I need to learn this.
Mhm.
And I started to learn the language, and I tell the stories of all the dumb and funny mistakes I make, but now I can actually laugh about it. So the story is shortened now, obviously, but it's a very touching story in the sense of people can relate to it because it has to do with the fear of public speaking, the feeling of shame, embarrassment, not feeling good enough, etc. These are all the emotions that people feel when they need to speak on a stage, for example. And when I'm teaching people how to speak on a stage, by telling this story, they're feeling all these emotions, even though it's my story, but they're feeling all these emotions that they know and they can relate to their stories. And that causes the impact of my message to be way bigger than if I would just give them tips and tricks.
And to answer my question, you also use the story.
Exactly. When it comes to more, I think you can use a lot of personal stories, to be honest. But for example, these communication change clients that we have, we use the stories of the personas themselves. So like I said, are they real story? I mean, yes, they're based on real stories, but we create a storyline around it. But they're not made up out of nowhere. They come from interviews that we have, but they're usually a summary of all the information that we gathered from all the people. To come up with a completely different story, I don't know how ethically correct that would be, to be honest.
You need like a specific story that never happened to you, but you know that will make a high impact on your audience. Would you create something like from raw data and then say a friend of a friend once happened?
I would find like an actual I would create the persona, like, okay, so this is Jimmy, and he went through this and this and this.
Jimmy is a person in the audience, or is some you just made up?
Yeah, then that's like someone made up, but it's based on factual case scenarios. Yeah.
Okay, so storytelling. What else could you use to captivate an audience?
What else?
What else? What's on your bag of tricks?
What? I mean, for one, I think it's just very important to just have the good energy when you show up. Like the basic things, it all starts with the basic. If you're presenting online, have your camera in front of your face. Make sure that lighting, that you're like not here, that your audio is good. Like all that, yeah. All these tiny details, they do make a difference. And like I said, if it's online, make sure that you look into the camera once in a while. Ask questions to other people. And when you are, I don't know, do you want to know on camera or on stage? Because
we can see both. Let's since you're talking about cameras, on camera.
On camera. Yeah, I think that's the most important thing is show up. Like just because you're sitting down and you're on camera, it's not an excuse for your energy to be deflated. Me personally, when I do a webinar for like hundreds and hundreds of people, it's really weird because I'm in my room by myself with my two little screens. I cannot see anyone except for that one person. So my energy sometimes feels low when I want to start. I just do 6 burpees. That's like my starting recipe for doing a good webinar, is get my energy pumping, put on some good music before I start, and make sure that I show up to
get into the mood.
Yeah, into the mood. I think we've had so many webinars and trainings that, you had someone talk and you're like, oh God, can I switch off my camera and do a nap, right? Yeah, I think that really is your responsibility as someone that is presenting, that you show up with a good energy.
What about on stage? So I also bring the energy. I do some gymnastic on the backstage, and then when I'm on stage.
Yeah, I think it's important when you're on stage not to strive to be like the perfect speaker, but the most authentic speaker.
Be authentic.
Yeah, for sure. Like you can use humor, you can make mistakes, you can make jokes. That's all fine.
Mm-hmm.
But breathe. Take a moment to just breathe in, breathe out. You don't have to rush. You can walk around, but like don't go back and forth constantly. Use the stage, but in a mindful way. So the audience is usually everywhere. Talk to everyone in your audience, right? A lot of the times, because I go to a lot of conferences, etc., I'm sitting on the other side and someone is constantly talking to these 3 people in the audience, and I'm like, hello.
The ones that smile to the person the most.
Exactly. Make people in your audience feel seen and heard, because it's not about you. Feels contradicting maybe, because you're like, oh, but I'm the one on stage and I want people to listen to me. Of course we want that, but it's about making the audience feel seen and heard. So you're doing this for them. They are taking their time of their lives to come and sit in front of you and listen to what you have to say. So make sure that you are interacting with them and not just on autopilot with yourself.
Let me challenge you a little bit. I understand what you say in being authentic. I understand, truly understand that. If you try to be someone else, it may go very wrong, right? But imagine that in this example, a friend of a friend, in this example, the person recognized that he is not like the most attractive person, not the most engaging, even boring person. So if a person goes there and be authentic, probably it will display being boring, being slow, not being that engaging. So the first thing that person may think is, okay, let me try to be more funny, more different, not authentic. And that would go wrong, according to you, because the person is not being authentic. So if you know that you are that kind of person that normally does not engage many people in these social events, what should you do?
I don't think you putting in effort and like putting your energy in a certain level, or putting in some techniques that you're maybe not used to, necessarily means not being authentic. It's just learning something new. What would be an authentic is to be, if you are a very calm person, for example, or you speak very softly, you're very soft spoken, to all of a sudden be like this bouncy ball going up and down, then obviously that's not you. But I think that even though if you are perceived as, and I don't really think people are boring, they just need a little bit of help to tweak how they communicate and interact in like a more interesting way. How can I put this? They probably just need to emphasize a little bit of some certain aspects of their personality. Like you don't have to change yourself necessarily. Like, are people really boring? Like, are people actually boring? Can we say that people are boring?
The topics are boring, right? Yeah, and depends on the listener.
Right.
They could be boring for some people, could be super interesting for others.
Yeah, but that's unfortunately you will have that regardless, but then focus on the people that are interested, and they'll probably speak your language a little bit more.
Right. Yeah.
Because the people that are already interested in your topic, they probably won't notice the so-called boringness because they're already interested. So you already got them. And then I would say, of course, think of how do you want to challenge yourself? And focus on techniques as your stage presence and how you can use your voice and all that kind of things. But I don't think doing that means not being authentic.
Mm-hmm. And if they go back to the moment where you're saying, understand who your audience is, what they are expecting from the conversation, how to add value, etc., maybe the person can just focus on those that are there for that topic, and just imagine that is delivering that value just for those.
Exactly. Because I think that you're already speaking the language of those people anyway, so they will understand you a little bit more. And these little techniques of, using your voice, the pace of your voice, going in pitches, not talking monotone, these are all techniques that everyone can learn and use to improve, but that has nothing to do with changing your authenticity. It's just going to magnify your authenticity, I think.
Okay. Eileen, we're close to the end. So for all the topics that we discussed today, in which or how could you help people listening if they want to reach out to you and work directly with you?
So if you would like to know how to captivate your audience, whether you're speaking on stage or speaking on camera, you can reach out to me via LinkedIn. I do one-on-one coaching where I can help you through a certain presentation. And I also have workshops available that we can do for groups, in company, events, and etc. And if you want to become a better trainer, then I also have train-the-trainer programs. And likewise, reach out to me to LinkedIn. Anyways, I love to connect with new people, especially people in the field. So feel free to reach out to me. And who knows how we can work together.
Thank you, Eileen, for everything you explained today.
Thank you, João, for your time. And have a nice day. Thank you, guys.
Goodbye.